Hi, everyone. Hi again. I was asked to address one more question with regard to the Arab-Israeli conflict, and that is the issue of land for peace. And why doesn't it solve the problem? So, good question. And this formulation, the two-state solution and the idea of land for peace, that Israel gives land and in return will get peace. This has been the governing assumption of the peace process for the past, well, probably since the formation of the State of Israel, definitely since 1967. Okay, and so again, certainly since 67, the idea is that Israel will give back the land it captured in the 1967 war, the Six-Day War, and in return, the Palestinians will give a promise to end attacks on Jewish civilians in Israel and abroad. Okay, that's the idea, and of course that the Arab states will buy into this and give their own promises not to invade Israel because I guess they're happy that the Palestinians have their land. So like I said, this was the governing formulation of the Arab-Israeli conflict or Israeli-Palestinian conflict for how to solve and bring this conflict to an end ever since forever, and certainly ever since 1967. The Israeli right, the right wing in Israel, lost faith in this formulation very early, or either never had faith or lost faith in it, in the good faith of the Arab side early on. But over time, this disillusionment, this lack of faith in land for peace, has expanded beyond the Israeli right to the Israeli center and the Israeli center left even. And a big part of this growing recognition in the Israeli public, in this growing recognition that land for peace is not a workable solution now, was the examples of Lebanon and Gaza, where Israel withdrew from land it held, and the result was not more peace and accommodation, but rather increased attacks on Israeli civilians, first from Lebanon and then from Gaza. Okay, so when Israel ceded territory, that territory became a launching pad for more attacks. And as I said in the previous Q&A session, the reason the two-state solution, the reason land for peace has failed to produce a peaceful solution is that the Palestinians' complaint, which they acknowledge publicly, I'm not reading their minds here, this is what they say openly. The Palestinians' complaint has never been about the 1967 occupation, the territories that Israel took in the 1967 war. Rather, when they say the occupation, what they mean is the 1948 occupation, okay? The formation of the State of Israel in the pre-1967 borders. Okay? They see that as the occupation. They see that as what has produced this conflict. Okay? So the Arabs think that the Palestinians think that their land was stolen by the Jews, and they want their stolen property back. Okay, they don't want a partition, where the Jews get this land and we will get this land. Okay, they don't want to split their stolen land with the thief, as they see it. Okay, and again, the Palestinians say this openly. When they complain about the Nakba and commemorate the Nakba, what they're talking about is the formation of the state of Israel, the Israeli War of what Israelis call their War of Independence in 1948. Okay, so that is the occupation that the Palestinians point to, and which means that what the Palestinians want is the land on which the state of Israel sits today. They want Haifa, Tiberias, Jerusalem, Tel Aviv. They see that as their land. The problem is not Judea, Samaria, Gaza, the settlements, etc., as the Palestinians see it. So I think Israelis were under this misapprehension that the problem is the settlements. The problem is Judea and Samaria, or Gaza. And so they gave up Gaza, and they withdrew from certain territories in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria. But it hasn't lessened the complaint. And so I think it's just that Israelis have become more aware now of how Palestinians think, thanks to the withdrawal from Lebanon and Gaza. They now can see with their own eyes what the Palestinians have said with their words since forever, since 1948. Israelis can now see that Arab attacks will not end even if Israel withdraws from Arab lands. Because the Arabs consider all of Israel Arab land, and so the attacks will continue as long as Israel occupies their territory. So that's one reason why the land for peace formulation has not produced results. The Arabs have never accepted it, and the Jews have accepted it, but now have come to see that this isn't really what we're talking about. That the other side doesn't want land for peace; they want the land. I mean, they don't want to. They don't want parts of the land. They want the land. So that's one reason for this disillusionment on the Israeli side. The second is more strategic or military, and that is that Israelis have come to understand that territory matters a great deal for the military defense of Israel. Okay? So in the modern era, in the age of high-tech air forces and long-range missiles, et cetera, there was this claim about the future of warfare, that with modern military technology, and not just missiles, but also mechanized armor and infantry and artillery, that in the next war, in the next era of war, territory won't matter as much as it used to for defending a country. And this was one of the arguments in the arsenal of those who advocated land for peace, those on the Israeli side who advocated land for peace. Look, we can give up land and not suffer strategically. Israel can defend itself as easily against Syria without the Golan Heights. Israel can defend Tel Aviv as effectively from West Bank, against attacks from the West Bank without holding the West Bank. Okay, so this was this argument that technology has made territory less relevant in modern warfare. And therefore, we can give up the land, give up territory, the Golan Heights, the West Bank, Gaza, and not suffer militarily for it, not have diminished security because of that. And what Israelis have found, to the embarrassment of these military experts, that the concept of strategic depth is as relevant in modern warfare as it was in the past. Okay, these rocket attacks from Gaza, rocket attacks from Lebanon, not to mention terrorist attacks, coming in from adjacent territories, demonstrate that actually holding territory still matters, even in modern warfare with all the technology. Okay? Which is why more Israelis now, even Israelis on the left, who want the land for peace formulation, they just think that it's too dangerous now because actually giving up land means ceding territory from which we will be attacked tomorrow. And so, so more and more Israelis now see that giving up territories close to Jerusalem and Tel Aviv is reckless. And you need to, if you look at the map, you'll see Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, is a 1 minute drive from Jerusalem and a 15-minute drive from Tel Aviv and from Israel's Seoul airport, international airport. Okay, so that's why land for peace is diminished in Israel. And again, like I said, it's never been a formulation that the Arabs have accepted or wanted. In Europe and in America, that formulation still reigns because for Europeans and for Americans, or the European left and the American left, from their perspective, rockets falling on Tel Aviv is not a deal breaker. Okay, from their perspective, it is better to have a number of rockets falling on Tel Aviv and Jerusalem than having continued military control over Judea and Samaria. Okay, and that's, of course, Israelis disagree. But the point is that Lebanon and Gaza taught that the price of Palestinian independence in Judea and Samaria will be rocket attacks on Tel Aviv, which is the kind of the physical home and cultural capital of the Israeli left. Okay, and that's what this support and rejection of land for peace used to be a division between right and left. The right rejected it or didn't believe that it was feasible, and the left believed in it. Okay, but once Tel Aviv, which again, like I said, is the heart and home of the Israeli left, once Tel Aviv became the target of rocket attacks from Gaza, the Israeli left became more skeptical and kind of joined the Israeli right in its understanding of land for peace. Okay, so when the price of peace was rockets falling on Kiryat Shmona and Ashkelon and Beersheba, these peripheral towns in the north and the south, the Israeli left was willing to accept rockets as a necessary evil, as collateral damage in pursuit of land for peace. Okay, but once the price of land for peace became rockets on Tel Aviv, the Israeli left clearly started backing away from the land for peace formulation and the two-state solution. Not in principle, but just as a practical reality for the foreseeable future. And this issue relates to this issue of land for peace and why it can or cannot succeed as the principle for settling this dispute. It shines a light on this problem of who is the aggressor, which is one of the questions that was asked yesterday. The question of who is the aggressor is, I'll give you a cheat sheet to the end of this discussion. Both sides see the other as the aggressor. But when you look at the situation today, there's physical evidence out there indicating to us clearly who is the aggressor in this conflict. Okay, when you look at it today. Okay, first, if you look along the Israeli borders with Gaza and most of Israel's Arab neighbors, other Arab neighbors, okay, Israel and Gaza, Israel and Egypt, Israel and Jordan, you'll see that the Israelis have erected defensive structures, okay, and defensive batteries, etc. But the Arabs have not. Okay? Arab regimes know that Israel is not seeking to invade or otherwise attack them. Okay? Whereas Israel knows from experience that Arab regimes around Israel are interested in doing that. In fact, you can extend that to the nuclear realm, that it's an open secret that Israel has had nuclear weapons for the past 50, 60 years or so. But this knowledge that Israel has a nuclear weapon or nuclear weapons has not prompted a single Arab country to seek nuclear weapons. Okay? They know that a nuclear Israel is not a threat to them. By contrast, the mere possibility that Iran might get nukes in the next 5 or 10 years is leading Arab countries to pursue, to look into and to threaten nuclearization on their part. So that's one piece of evidence that shows who's the aggressor and who's not. A second is that when Israel pulled out of Lebanon in the 90s, Israel had invaded in the 80s in response to rocket attacks from southern Lebanon. So when Israel eventually pulled out of Lebanon in the 90s, what followed was rocket attacks rather than peace from Lebanon. This despite the fact that Lebanon and Hezbollah, this militia in Lebanon, don't have any claims of lost land in Israel. It's not that they think that northern Israel belongs to Hezbollah historically. The third piece of evidence is that when Israel evacuated all of its settlements and military bases and soldiers from the Gaza Strip, same thing happened. What followed was rocket attacks, not peace. Okay. Okay. So and also in these recurring wars with Gaza and with Hezbollah in the south and the north, Israel uses its military resources to protect its citizens from rockets and terrorist attacks. Okay, there's a border fence around Gaza, there's a border wall around the West Bank, there are bomb shelters, there's the Iron Dome technology, there's anti-tunnel technology against tunnels that are coming into Israel from Gaza and Lebanon. The Palestinians don't invest in, don't have these resources to protect their citizens from Israel. Okay? Because again, they know from experience that Israel is not seeking to invade and attack their citizens or kill their citizens. In fact, they use their citizens as human shields for their weapons. Okay? They encourage civilians to join their clashes with Israeli soldiers, and they store their weapons in schools and mosques and hospitals. So you can see in terms of, again, who's the aggressor, what stops Palestinians from killing more Israelis is Israel. And what stops Israel from killing more Palestinians is Israel. Okay? Israel, for whatever reason, either morals or PR, doesn't matter. Israel is the one that limits the number of Palestinians it kills in its conflicts with Gaza or Lebanon or in the West Bank. And you can see it also, this is the last piece of evidence, is that in 1948, 47, 48, when the UN drew up the partition plan, the two-state solution, the Jews agreed to it and the Arabs rejected it. And in the years that followed, the Palestinians rejected every offer that was put on the table for a two-state solution, including offers that included East Jerusalem as their capital. Okay? And throughout, the deal breaker was the Palestinian demand that, or the, I guess the Israeli demand that the Palestinians accept Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. Okay, so and this is something that Palestinians simply don't agree to, don't agree conceptually, not as a strategic. They believe, the Palestinians believe that Israel was built on land that was stolen from them. Okay, and they do not accept the idea that this theft should stand. They want their property back. They want their land back. They don't want to partition, to split the stolen property with the thief, like I said. Okay, and this is why all these. Okay, so when you look at the situation, going to the question of who's the aggressor, when you look at the situation today, it's clear who's the aggressor and who is aggressed against the Arabs, the Muslims, the Palestinians. They're trying to attack and weaken and erase the state of Israel, and the Israelis want to not be attacked and not be erased. But that's not how the Arabs see it. That's from their perspective, this is like a snapshot of today. What they argue, the way they see it, is that is with a historical depth of 100 years or so. And from their perspective, the Jews are not simply local people of the Middle East who are living on their land and trying to defend themselves, trying to hold their territory. From the Palestinian or from the Arab perspective or Muslim perspective, the Jews were the aggressors when they came here 100 years ago and started settling in the Holy Land. Okay, so the Arabs do not accept the idea that the Jews are local people who returned home, who are home now. Okay, they see the Jews as invaders, thieves, imperialists. Okay, they don't belong here. Okay, so they see when they take this snapshot today and see the Israelis building these defenses, et cetera, they see the Jewish state today, again, the snapshot, as a legacy of Israel's past aggression and theft. And every day that Israel continues to exist is another day in which the Jewish aggressor gets to enjoy the fruits of his aggression and theft. Okay, so again, so both sides see the other as the aggressor. And so the solution, for the solution for the Arabs is for the Arabs to regain the stolen land and for the Jews to leave or die, to not be there anymore. And this is why the Arabs have rejected every partition plan that was put before them. For the Jews, the solution is for the Arabs to accept that the Jews are native to the land and are there by right. And this is why the Jews have accepted every partition plan that was put before them, because they want to get the Arabs on, to sign on the dotted paper, on the dotted line, that the Jews have a right to be here and have a right to own and govern certain parts of the Holy Land.